Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise.
Welcome to Stop Now. I'm Nate.
Hello there. I'm Melissa, and we're back for this week's talk show.
Yes, Melissa. And this is not just any talk show. This is a very special talk show because we're going to end the talk show, and this is going to be our last show, guys.
Sorry, Nate. What's going on? Are you trying to be funny and make a joke?
No, Melissa, I'm serious. As you know, everything has to come to an end.
Oh, I see. I know where you're going now. You mean the elections and the Trump era.
Yes, that's going to happen in a few days.
Exactly. Let us continue with our talk show topics and the questions.
All right. See, you never take me seriously, Melissa. Like this is what always happens, guys. But again, this is our last discussion. There's no more waiting, and we're going to go live from next week on. We'll be inviting guests from different fields, and we're also going to ask our listeners and viewers to call into our show as well so they can share their stories.
Wow, that's great news. It'll be interesting. See how it goes. I can't wait.
I know it is going to be fun, Melissa.
Then we shall continue with other stories for this week.
Great. Well, okay. So Melissa, there are more stories to be looked at on today's episode. So, let's not waste any more time. Let's not dilly-dally. Let's get right to it.
All right, then, not a problem, Nate. The next few stories to be discussed are similar to the stories we've been talking about in the last episode.
All right. But if the stories are similar, why do we still have to analyze them?
That's an interesting question. It is true that the stories are almost alike, but there are slight differences in the manner of approach, and each story has different effects on the individuals and their family.
Agreed. To make this segment more interactive, I suggest we take the stories one after the other. I'll take the first one, you take the next one, and we'll continue in that order until we get to the very end.
Okay, let's do it. You pick the stories and start.
All right. So, our first story this week is about Joy. Now, Joy has degrees in computer science and math, and she's a software engineer. She's in her 40s, and she's worked in the financial sector in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I've been outsourced more times than I can count, and I'm a high performer, Joy says. I have a career of no gaps. It's a model career. I've got commendations, I've got awards, I've got promotions, but she also says she saw almost no Americans at her former employer of over 7,500 people, and says it's inaccurate to classify H-1B recipients as high skill. She says the notion that these H-1B visa holders are specialized is a complete sham. They come out of these sham universities with no specializations whatsoever. Joy says the most insulting part was being forced to train her unqualified replacement. I was told that I'd only get my severance if I agreed to train my replacement, who was far less qualified than I was, and if I promised not to sue. It's an insult. She said that she didn't think that after 20 years in her career, she'd be constantly scared of layoffs, and she doesn't want her own child to go into STEM now.
That's really crazy, Nate. Kate is from New Jersey and is in her 50s. She has worked in IT for 30 years. I'm a mom to two beautiful girls, and I told them not to go into technology because there is no future for them. We have been taken over and sold out to cheap foreign labor from India. She despises the phrase shortage of American workers because she says it is simply untrue. It's all a lie. There's no shortage. I watched my friends and colleagues get pushed out of this industry. We're always scared.
Now, Tiffany is another story that we can talk about, Melissa. Tiffany's a single mother and the sole provider for her family. Tiffany's worked in IT since the H-1B program began. She has a bachelor's in computer science and a master's in computer engineering, and she's been unemployed since July. At first, foreign labor was used to complement the U.S. workers. They performed on the off hours. Then they brought in the next wave of workers, but this time it was to replace us. She said that these foreign workers are not high skilled and that even American high school graduates have a higher skill set. Layoffs have repeatedly forced her to move her kids to a new state, and she worries about how that will impact them. My family's lived in 5 states in 6 years. It's not okay for school-age children. their development keeps getting interrupted, she says. She took an apprenticeship workshop for women in STEM, looking to get back into the industry. Out of 30 attendees, Melissa, only 5 were from America. And there was another workshop being held by the same group in India. She also pointed out that the security risks associated with letting foreigners control America's largest data sources in industries ranging from healthcare to banking to even the airline industry.
So unfortunate. And I'm sorry to interrupt the story, but we've been hearing the word, I don't even know if it's a word or acronym, but we've been hearing the word STEM in most of the stories. For my sake and for the sake of other viewers that don't understand, can you tell us what it means before we continue?
Okay, sure, no problem. And thank you for that question, Melissa, because this is something that we probably should clarify for the listeners out there. So, STEM is an acronym for the field of science, technology, engineering, and math. STEM education, then, is the learning of these STEM subjects through an integrated approach, one that offers hands-on and relevant learning experiences. Many people would agree that STEM is the key to innovation and job creation in the United States.
Thank you very much. STEM sure doesn't sound like a terrible thing. But why then did Joy say that she doesn't want her kids to get into the program?
Well, Melissa, as cool as it may sound, there's definitely some pros and cons concerning this program. Maybe some other time we could have a closer look at how the program works and get an even clearer insight as to what the pros and cons actually are.
Okay, Nate, I really can't wait. Once we get home, I'll start my research on the project.
All right. All right, Melissa. Now let's get back to these stories, shall we?
Definitely.
All right. So our next story is about Diane. Now, Diane is a mother and a tech worker. We have no voice in Washington. There are 500 lobbyists for big tech, for cheap labor via the H-1B, L-1, OPT, and H-4 EAD programs. Who wants to hear from us? She says. She continues, we are compromising our education and national security by placing foreign workers in these roles. She's disappointed that the government is prioritizing foreign citizens over its own, even though she's done everything right, Melissa. She says that foreign workers have also raised the expectations for work hours because they're so desperate to become American citizens that they'll work 15-hour days and even throughout the weekend. She says there's no work-life balance at all anymore.
That is no good. Mike worked in tech for a major department store until he was forced to train his replacements. Their work was such a mess that they had to hire me back to fix it after laying me off, only to then outsource me again. IT overheard was 2 to 3% when it was all Americans and is 4 to 5% now. They're not even saving money because the guest workers make so many mistakes. He said there are now far more data breaches and fines that the companies must pay given the rising number of IT errors. He said the data would be safer in American hands.
You can hear the frustration in these stories, Melissa, especially from that one from Mike. And so let's continue on, because now we're going to talk about Dorothy. Dorothy worked at a large insurance company where she faced harassment and discrimination. She said she had to train people with no skills starting from scratch. And if any employee spoke up, she said, they'd be slandered by management. If we said anything, they'd accuse us of being racist, using the company's anti-discrimination policies. They tout women in STEM only to replace us with foreign men who sexually harass us. I remember one man complained that there were, quote, too many queens and not enough kings in our office.
It's crazy. Lastly, Mary is from Ohio and she got laid off by a major insurance company. Decade by decade, India completely took over, she said. Now, guest workers are also in leadership positions where they hold shadow meetings with other foreigners and exclude the Americans. She said her firing is taking a serious financial toll on her.
So, as we've heard, the stories that we've read, Melissa, they are anecdotal, but they're also corroborated by data. In nearly all of the worker stories, one commonality is that they describe their foreign replacements as underqualified or unspecialized. And indeed, foreign educated immigrants significantly underperform on literacy, numeracy, and computer skills relative to native-born Americans. Similarly, The workers said that Americans were often discriminated against. There have, in fact, been such cases in the courts where Americans say that the managers, recruiters, or even the corporations themselves favored foreign nationals and or discriminated against women. So their stories are not abnormal. They mirror the negative experiences of millions of Americans who either currently or used to work in STEM. The single most common frustration that all of the people in these stories expressed was the feeling that they simply are not being heard by lawmakers and their stories. Doing so would be an important first step towards passing legislation that puts American workers first.
On this note, we have to bring the show to an end, Nate. I hope we all learned a lot from the different victim stories to our hearings. Most of the stories clearly explain how the immigration plan has affected both the foreigners and the locals.
Yes, and we have a lot more stories to talk about, but unfortunately, time won't let us do that. So, to our viewers and listeners out there, we urge everyone to stay tuned as we'll be bringing you more stories from around the world live on our talk show starting next week.
Once again, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified when we post new videos.
And as always, don't forget to watch out for the full details of this week's stories published on our campaign project's website.
Bye for now, and I'm so excited and nervous for next week to go live.
Yes, hey, you'll be fine, Melissa. We'll be fine. You know, everybody's going to be fine. Right now, just go home and do some research on STEM. Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise.